This is part number 9 of Mysteries of History, Dinosaurs to Extraterrestrials by Jeremy Auldaney. Copyright 2014, all rights reserved. And we're starting on page 47. Now, I was talking about the only absolute in science, which is the philosophy of evolution, which is not really science, but it's the only absolute in science. It's considered because they never question it. Now, we were talking about garbage in and garbage out. You may be able to do science correctly, but if you're using the basing it on wrong assumptions, then you will get a wrong answer. This often happens because of the evolutionary philosophy. That's why science often goes wrong, and they have to change their understanding when new facts come in. That's why they claim that evolution is true science, because it changes with every new discovery. They keep making mistakes that are corrected with further discoveries. Evolution speculation has been called, quote, a fact of science, end quote. No, actually, it's only a fact of the philosophy of science, which is considered to be an absolute. It is the only absolute in scientific philosophy. It also leads to wrong conclusions. The problem is most of these changes in science would have never been necessary if they had not been biased and had studied to see how it fit with the Bible and the real facts from reputable experiments and observations. Here is a witness of what I'm saying. Evolutionist Robert Jastrow, September 7th, 1925 to February 8th, 2008. He was an American astronomer, physicist, and cosmologist. He was a leading NASA scientist, populist author, and futurist. His expressed views on creation were that although he was an agnostic, which means believes in the supernatural but not in God of the Bible, and not a believer, end quote, it seems to him that, quote, the curtain drawn over the mystery of creation will never be raised by human efforts, end quote. True, only God's Word can reveal unobservable facts, what we call the paranormal or supernatural, things beyond the physical. Here's a quote from Robert Jastrow, God and the Astronomers, New York, Reader's Library 2000, pages 106 to 107, quote, for the scientist who has lived by his faith in the power of reason, a lot like our founding fathers who were deists. A deist is a person who believes in the power of reason. He doesn't deny God, he just doesn't believe in the supernatural nature of God. For the scientist who lived by his faith in the power of reason, the story ends like a bad dream. He has scaled the mountain of ignorance. He is about to conquer the highest peak. As he pulls himself over the final rock, he is greeted by a band of theologians who have been sitting there for centuries, end quote. Very good, Mr. Jastrow. For example, atheistic Darwinian evolutionists claimed for decades that dinosaurs were slow, cumbersome, cold-blooded, poorly designed creatures that natural selection had made extinct, and that they dragged their tails in the mud. With more evidence from tracks and anatomy, and by the way, they discovered clear back when Hitchcock discovered those tracks, and they realized that they were dinosaur tracks back in the late 1800s and early 1900s. They realized that dinosaurs did not drag their tails in the mud from what they saw of the tracks, but they ignored it. And they dragged their tails in the mud. With more evidence from tracks and anatomy, they found that the creation viewpoint was more accurate. The tracks, nests, bones, all showed that dinosaurs were well-organized, possibly warm-blooded, fast-moving, very intelligent creatures, well adapted to their environment. Pete Larson, paleontologist of the Black Hills Institute, in his book Rex Appeal, published in 2002 by Peter Larson and Kristen Donan, suggested that Tyrannosaurus rex may have been one of the smartest creatures on Earth. Now evolutionists can't understand why the dinosaurs became extinct. Or did they? If dinosaurs became extinct, they are the only family of animals that did. All others have living relatives. No, birds are not dinosaurs. Paleontologists who say this cannot tell the difference between a dinosaur and a canary. Microevolution. Okay, I would say that ornithologists who are experts on bird anatomy say that they didn't come from dinosaurs. And they're evolutionists too. But the paleontologists who do not have that knowledge still hang to the evolutionary philosophy, the absolute in science. Microevolution. How about that? You see, that macroevolution is where things change from some entirely different creature into something else. Now, microevolution is where the same creature has slight changes in size and color and such as that. Microevolution. I have been noticing that several fossils I have discovered in California, like the California fan palm, Washingtonia filifera, fragments from a Miocene marine fossil shale site in Corona, California, in the Santa Ana Mountains, next to Skyline Drive, had designs in the leaf. This is a fossil site I discovered. It was my birthday, and I wanted to know what I wanted for my birthday. So I said, well, I would like to find fossils. So I said, okay, I'm going to the best place to find them is in a road cut, someplace where something is cut through either a riverbed or a road. And so I figured, and then it has to be in sedimentary rock. So I went to the Santa Ana Mountains, which was a sedimentary deposit, and found a road that cuts through, and sure enough, I found fossils. And these were marine. They had, this leaf I found had designs in the leaf that were identical to the palm growing in our yard. And a whole leaf I found in Anaheim Hills, Miocene marine, in the diatomite, was identical to today's fan palms of this species. It had the same pattern. Also, petrified wood from this same palm is common in the Mojave Desert. I saw many specimens weathering out of the Miocene strata near the Calico Early Man site. The palm apparently reached its current form by at least 50 to 70 million years before present in the Eocene, Paleocene, according to the evolutionists, making it one of the oldest known palm identifiable to taxon through morphological characteristics of leaves, petioles, and other fossilized parts, which is still common today as a native plant. Fossils of this palm exist as far north as Colorado, Wyoming, and Oregon, and are the oldest known palm identifiable to taxon through morphological characteristics. In other words, it did not evolve for 70 million years, according to evolution theory. And yet they also claimed that it was evolution that caused it to suddenly appear in the first place after the KT boundary. Creationists believe in microevolution. Creation scientists do not believe in Darwinian macroevolution from one family of organisms to another, but do believe in microevolution, or adaptation. I have been convinced by the evidence since researching for this book that both are false. There is no proven microevolution except under the guidance of man producing an unnatural hybrid through breeding. There may be some very rare ones in nature, but I have not seen any evidence. Where are the microevolutionary transitional forms between Washingtonia filifera and other genera of palms? I have not seen any genera that is a link between a supposed primitive cycad palm or any other plant which became the fan palm. In fact, botanist Dr. George Howe, professor at Masters College, and Dr. Walter Lammertz on the staff of the Creation Research Society confirmed my observations. Quote, in the spring of In the spring of 1969, George Howe and Walter Lammerts staked out areas near their homes in California for plant succession studies in order to discover any possible evidence for the establishment of varieties and eventually subspecies which would lend support to the concept of microevolution. The results of studies through 1973, as reported by Lammerts and Howe, 1974, pages 208 to 228, provided no evidence for the production of enhancement of varieties of subspecies through natural selection. In fact, under unfavorable and catastrophic conditions, natural selection apparently worked to perpetuate the normal or prevalent varieties, end quote. The oldest fossils of the California fan palm indicate that it appeared right after the flood of Noah and supports the belief that the Cenozoic after the Cretaceous-KT boundary is post-flood. I just discovered where the post-flood boundary was since I wrote this book, due to my research. Before that, I used to think it was just in the middle of the Pleistocene, in the middle of the Pliocene and all of the Pleistocene. Now I believe it goes even further back in the fossil strata. I saw photos of a Jurassic cricket and a Cretaceous cricket that are identical to my crickets I raise as pets generation after generation. Then there are sharks, lizards, Komodo dragons, etc. that show no evolution. They show no macro or micro evolution, so-called adaptation. Actually, the adaptation comes about because a species that is better adapted comes into a new area and then flourishes. That's where adaptation comes in. Now, there are some variations in genetics, but they're very minor. The only adaptation that occurs is when another species or genus or family of animals, insect, plant, which have characteristics that cause it to thrive or at least survive when they enter a new area. In other words, organisms were designed in the beginning and have remained the same throughout Earth history, except for variations in individuals and in groups when they become isolated, but they're very minor. And I don't think this produces our subspecies. I think subspecies were created separately, is the way it appears from the evidence I have seen. Darwin's finches. Further observation after Darwin shows these birds have exhibited changes to size of their beaks in adaptation to changes in environment, but these changes revert back to the original when the environment changes back again. This is not evolution. In the Cretaceous New Jersey amber, secular date 90 to 94 million years ago, a very rare ant, Formicidae miramicini, was discovered, which is still alive today. And there are several kinds of ants that look different sizes, colors, way of life. Some sting, some do not. Some live underground, some live in mounds, some in wood. Some invade homes and some don't. Ant kinds eat different kinds of food. These ants do not mate with each other. There are no links between them, and in fact, the predatory ants sometimes attack and destroy nests of other ants. How could these have come from a common ant ancestor? No microevolution here. From these observations, I came to the conclusion that both evolutionists and some creationists are wrong about microevolution. And by the way, all the evidence that evolution is used to support evolution are from microevolution, which is produced by man's breeding of animals, domestic animals, and it is not found in nature. So when Darwin used that, he was using false evidence, like mixing apples and oranges. There had to be 2 kinds of each of these on the ark. Now, it was not necessary to have all kinds of dogs, for example, because man would create them by breeding after the flood. All God had to do was select a dog that had all the genetic variations in them. This microevolution was produced by man, not found in nature, except in very rare occurrences, if it happened at all, and I have not seen any evidence of it. For example, the Kaibab and Albert squirrels, which were isolated when the Colorado Plateau rose and the Colorado River cut them off from each other. See George Howe and John Mayer's 1985 Creation Research Society, pages 68 to 78. This was in the Creation Research Society Quarterly. Evolutionists had given one a subspecies name, but it turned out that the differences were superficial, like the differences in individuals of a given family of organisms, enhanced by inbreeding. For example, birds like finches have all kinds of different colors, but they are not subspecies. They are all the same identical bird. Also, all humans are the same species, including white, brown, and black. They're Homo sapiens sapiens. However, there is a question about genetic engineering of hybrid species, which are not natural, which may include the Neanderthals. We will discuss that later, the evidence I came across researching for this book. Authors note, these squirrels also support the conclusion that the Colorado Plateau did not rise before or during the flood of Noah, like some creationists think. Like some creationists believe that then there would not have been Cenozoic squirrels divided by the rise of the Colorado Plateau, Uinta Basin, Uncompahgre uplift, and the Paradox Basin, an older Mesozoic flood deposited rock which rose during the late Cenozoic, and the cutting of the Colorado River, leaving these squirrels alive today. In support of this is the mid-tertiary to late Cenozoic age lava found in these areas. Why aren't dinosaurs and large mammals found together? I have pondered a puzzling mystery since I was in grade school and read dinosaur books. If the Bible is true, and I knew it was, why don't we find lots of large mammals, human remains, and artifacts in the Mesozoic strata with dinosaurs? And why don't we find dinosaurs with large mammals in the Cenozoic? In my research as I wrote this book, I discovered evidence that shows the Paleozoic and Mesozoic were deposited during the first part of the flood of Noah, and the Cenozoic, after the KT boundary, were formed by post-flood runoff and cataclysms 100-plus years later, about the time of Peleg and the Tower of Babel, where no dinosaurs are found. There should still be some evidence. Some at creation, if they were indeed at the same time, there should be some evidence of mixing. Some creationists claim, like I did, that mammals were faster moving than the reptiles and were thus deposited in different strata, but this would not account for the total lack of mixing of these creatures. This is not an explanation. This answer is still inadequate. There should be some mixing. I discovered that the fossils in the Paleozoic and Mesozoic strata during the flood were sorted by the different speed of moving water and weight and biological zonation, and by tidal impacts from different habitats from different directions. But the Cenozoic fossils were different cataclysmic events, some local, some worldwide, at different times during the centuries after the flood. I will continue this, and we're just about within 2 pages of the end of Chapter 1 of Cataclysm in the Fossil Record. Then we'll start Chapter 2, Paradigm Shift.